And we have a show for you folks tonight. Dada, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad.
Hello. 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 How are you? Why? Oh, it's you. I didn't expect to see you right here.
I want to have a little fun today, guys. And why is that not showing up like it's supposed to? That's terrible. There is a stone wall in the background on the top today.
I don't see
And
a stone wall. I see a pyramid.
there's also a pyramid. For some reason, this
A Mayan pyramid.
a
Or a
Mayan
Uran
pyramid.
pyramid.
I grabbed a pyramid, and then I was trying to get a clip up, so I grabbed a pyramid and I grabbed a pothole, and I went from there.
Hi, TA. Hi, Sora Luna.
Yes,
Hi,
let us
Patrice.
acknowledge everybody in the chat. If Denny shows up, I appreciate his in-between stream bot challenges. That's always fun. Sora,
Hi, Amish Hitman.
Amish Hitman, hugs to everybody. We always love the hugs. We got TA. Who else am I missing? Patrice Ripley popped in here to see what was interesting to be talked about tonight. And that is all for now, but we hope to see more. Hello.
We're gonna do unknown history.
Eric Folms, welcome to the channel. Welcome to the show. Our topic tonight is, well, quite simply, it's ancient construction versus current construction, and it is very interesting what you learn when you start looking at them. There, that should be visible now. A little bit visible. Daddy, you know what that stone is, right?
Looking at them. What stone? Oh, that stone. Yeah, that's in the not in the Andes. Yeah, in the Andes, isn't it?
I forget exactly where this stone is located, but this is called the 12-angle stone, and it's a very popular stone in archaeological history. For many reasons, some we've mildly discussed on this channel and even on this show. Others, kind of weird. Now, we've talked before, and the goal of this show is to go over construction methods. Now, there's something I seriously see wrong, and that's today we have roads that have what you see in our desert before you, and that's potholes. We construct these buildings and we erect them so fast using such modern creations that in 100 years the buildings are falling apart. In 5 years the roads are Swiss cheese, and they're not holding together to what we put them through. And to me, I wonder, how do we have millennia old structures, thousands of years old, that have lasted weather, earthquake, shifting of continents, and sinking of cities, and rising of islands, and they're still
Stone.
standing? But our stuff, modern technology, advanced technology, we have buildings tipping over in Washington because they're too heavy. State, not city, or not
We
DC.
we use stone. We use stone as a decoration as opposed to a foundation.
That's very true. And
They used stone 100%.
yeah, everything was stone. But as you look into, there's a lot of controversy over history because the tools that we've found to have been used on these stones to carve them, to force them to fit together so tightly where you can't
Well,
fit a pin through them.
I mean,
The
the
tools
wall
we
you're
found just
showing,
don't make sense.
the wall you're showing there is on top of a mountain. It is constructed with stone that's from 25 miles away, and they noticed that the base of these walls are made like that, and then above it, a much cruder form of bricklaying is involved, and even the people, the indigenous people there, said that these earlier constructions were from someone else. The gods left it for them, and then they went ahead and fixed them up. So they're even earlier. They're way earlier than their history even has shows.
It's
Says.
interesting you say that because there's many, and when I say many in archaeological means, it means like every fourth or fifth structure you come across, you realize that 2,000 or 3,000 years ago they built a castle or a building or something there, but 5,000 or 6,000 years ago there was a bigger, heavier castle there.
Yeah, it's
that
unbelievable.
They just built on top of.
I mean, it's like, I think even where the Parthenon stands, the base of the Parthenon is a huge, flat foundation. And some of the stones there are the size of buses.
Yes.
We couldn't
let me acknowledge
we couldn't
these. Yay, ancient architecture for realsies. We didn't make them. Okay, well, I want to bring that up early in the show as a talking point. They didn't have to deal with the bureaucracy and taxation of today where they want roads to break and constantly have to spend money on them. I suppose that's a fair assessment. I'm an old school stone mason, and even with modern tools, we cannot recreate, duplicate what ancient tools have done. Guys, I will have to find these links of the shows that I watch later, because you guys, mind blown just on some of the ideas, the philosophies, the engineering, and the science behind these. So let's first, at the beginning of the show, we are going to remove extraterrestrial beings or
Welcome, Sheila.
assistance from this topic. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sheila. I appreciate it. I've been popping into other shows trying to get ideas for ways to improve, ways to engage better. And I've been hanging out in a couple of chats and gained some subscribers just sitting there chatting. So I appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoy my show. And I want to welcome you to the channel. So we're going to remove aliens from this to start with. We're not going to discuss aliens in ancient architecture. So that should narrow this down just a little. But Dad,
well, we could talk about advanced civilizations.
Well, what would you consider advanced if they could move? One of the rocks I was looking at was measured at roughly 165 tons.
More advanced than us.
Oh, far more advanced. All right. One guy, let's start with large stones. So one guy on his YouTube channel, and this is a fun thing to look at. He's been working with large 1, 2, 5, and 10 ton stones himself, and working with the idea of moving these stones on pebbles.
Welcome, Priscilla.
Welcome. I appreciate you coming to the channel. Thanks for stopping by. Hey, Ryder, welcome. No timer today, but hopefully you'll
pebbles,
stick around for a bit.
Moving those huge stones larger than a 747 on pebbles.
On pebbles?
And what's under the pebbles? Dirt.
Dirt! I'm not even kidding. So one of the techniques used is this frame bracket system. Now, obviously, they didn't have a lot of tools. What they had, roughly estimated in that time, was rope, wood, maybe, but not definitely the wheel. Though I find it hard to believe they didn't when there's structures carved into stone that are shaped like wheels in other areas of the world. So people had to know that round things roll. That's just me.
Remember, some of this stone was like diamond.
Yes. A lot of the stones used in some of these buildings were like granite and other stones.
Even stronger than granite, yeah.
They believed that a lot of these tools had to be diamond. And honestly, that's what I was thinking. My mind in how to... Basalt. Yeah. Isn't basalt one of the softer ones, though? Isn't that like a grade 6 or 7, whereas granite's like an 8 point something? My mind went immediately to thinking how we currently carve and cut wood versus how we did it 50 and 100 years ago. So I could go to the store and buy a planer and run a board through the planer. It'll smooth out whatever side is on the planing side.
Power planer.
Right.
But you can still buy a hand planer.
I have a hand planer in my garage, and there's a little knob to angle the blade so that you can shave it across the wood and plane the wood down the way you want to see it. So my mind immediately went to, what do we have now that we had, and I can compare how we advanced technologies and try to reverse engineer what they might have done. Well, what if they took a log and put a slit in it and put hardened diamond or stone in that slit and rubbed it back and forth long enough, it would smooth the stone out, wouldn't it?
I guess.
If they did several of these logs next to each other and just moved a bracket of logs tied together with stones in a groove across the surface until the surface began to smooth, what would that replicate?
You mean a polished feature?
It would be like sandpapering it, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah.
And that's kind of what my mind went to. Maybe they didn't just have the tools. Maybe what they used was what was around them. And I came across some really weird videos.
There are, I mean, there are, like, okay, in Egypt, you know, by the pyramids, they have found like slots in the ground where wheels were sitting on axles, and these wheels were used to cut the stone. They don't know how they powered it. But you know, basically you're talking about a circular saw and sand to cut the stone. And that's fine and dandy. But there are stones out there that are just beyond belief.
Why?
Because they're too huge to move.
What did they have to do with the rest of their day?
Not even, no. I'm talking about a stone the size of a locomotive, or maybe
I would say the same thing.
4 locomotives.
I would say the same thing. But I watched a 50 or 60-year-old guy put a 6-ton block in the ground by himself.
I saw that. That's a 6-ton block. That's not a 6,000-ton block.
Same methods, Dada. Same methods. Okay, so this, for the audience, this old guy moves pole barns and designs his own rock sculptures to work on these techniques that he's used in construction all his life.
Yeah, it's pretty damn neat.
Oh, this is the guy that moved those huge stones with the rocks, the pebbles.
He uses like you know, taking sand away from letting the stone's weight kind of center itself in the hole by removing sand from underneath it.
No,
all different.
What he did was he set it into the sand and then wet the sand to allow the block to fall in properly and stand.
Right. Wash the sand away. Really?
Did you watch how he lifted it?
Yeah,
I was blown away.
Yes, I mean, listen, you know, those are. What the hell they're called? Block and tackle. Block and tackle's been around a long time. I'm not saying that ancient peoples didn't have engineering. They didn't have ways to double, triple, quadruple force. But I mean, some of these things are just so beyond belief. I mean, how would an ancient people flatten the top of a mountain? Not only flatten the top of a mountain, but there's no rubble around the mountain's base. So they literally got rid of the rubble too.
All right. I'm going to get there because there's way more I found out, okay? So let's interject with a weird story that was interjected in one of the videos that came up with a theory that I have to at least consider, along the same lines of what we're already talking. This older guy, you don't see his face, you just go over his theory. He's a little rough on his theory, but I still caught it. Alcatraz, I believe it was, a gentleman escaped from his cell, and they went to do the cell check and found 3 bars perfectly missing like they were cut from the window. I believe it was Alcatraz. And when the guy was caught, they asked him how he did it. Glue, string, and sand. He cut through steel with string and sand. So this made me think that if you're forced to do nothing except think about what your project in front of you is, you do nothing but work on that project. You have no outside interference, like prison, which I can relate to. You sit there and think. You look around you. You think about how things work and what's going on and what you can do to overcome the situation you're in. So imagine yourself.
You remember Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah, I watched it a while ago, yeah.
his little stone pickaxe.
Mm-hmm.
And remember what his friend said?
No.
Well, he looked at it and it looked like a toy. And he said he couldn't imagine him using that to escape, but in actuality, he did. It just took him a long time.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about a slight amount of pressure, a very long time. Mountains have turned to dust in just by water and time and seasons.
To put this into scale, this other video took a rope and explaining the same basic concept of cutting through steel. What if they moved the rock, rough rock, not necessarily precision cut at the time, up to the feature where it was supposed to fit into, and you keep a wet rope and sand going through, and you pull the rope back and forth between the rock as you inch the rock closer together. This begins to make both rocks on the same face where they would be connecting, begins to rub them into the same feature, the same groove, until you can slide the rock in together.
Yeah. There's another theory on some of those 6-sided, 7-sided rocks is bags of cement.
Okay, so in the Tutankhamun tomb, Tutankhamun, in the tomb and around, and in the area of Tutankhamun and his wife, I believe, on one of the sides of the, what is the name of that building? Him and his wife were supposedly carved into the side, okay? So there is a historian that's, what era was he studying, that works with like concrete and mixtures and things, and has somewhat reliably plaused to me in watching his video that a lot of the features that we believe may have been intricate stone cuttings are not necessarily stone cuttings, just a type of plaster or concrete that when applied could be worked like clay and then would harden with time.
There's also, in that same general area, there's a tunnel. And in this tunnel, there's crypts. The crypts are sealed with lids. These lids and basically boxes are carved from a single piece of stone. And they're carved beautifully. I mean, they're as smooth as glass. And the inside, the corners are absolutely perfect. Laser precision. And we to this day can't do that type of work. On top of that, they were brought in to these down this tunnel and put into these little areas along the sides. Again, how the hell were they moved? There's a lot of questions on how advanced people were, and if these things are as old as we think they are, or maybe 10,000 years older.
Yeah, because they are made of stone. You cannot carbon date stone.
I mean, remember the history, our normal history, the history we're taught was 10,000 years ago. We were in the caves. We had stone tools. So
we were in the
it's
caves.
It's kind of impossible to do the work.
There's one more theory of not only cutting, but boring that I caught shortly before the show. Do you know what I mean?
Well, again, with sand and a spinning. No?
No, this blew my mind, Data. I came into this show so excited. I came up with so much information I've never even heard of. There's the sand and the spinning. But I was watching a video where that was done, and somebody spent hours and barely moved millimeters through a rock with the exact tools that we can somewhat precisely make from what they had in that area, or even using a little beyond what we believe they had. A scientific experiment came up and has some mild validity and touch point to reality in our findings. That thousands of years ago, we may have already known what a tuning fork was, how to use, how to create, and we already knew what acoustics and audio were and what they could do, what they were powerful of.
Right.
Okay? So, on some monuments, statues, and hieroglyphs, there's this staff that has almost a two-pronged fork at one end and a weird hook at the other. And it's believed that this staff was handed down as a point of power through time. And with that being said, it kind of makes sense that maybe the staff had some importance. And maybe at some point somebody discovered that if you hit a tuning fork at just the right angle and it vibrates, that it causes a vibration through an object. And this staff closely approximates what would be necessary to hit a tuning fork and drop a piece of even copper on top of a granite rock. You hit the fork and it'll slowly vibrate into the rock.
Interesting.
So when I saw this, I was blown away. And there's scientific studies where they use little copper mounts and you just stick it at the end of this rod. The center of the rod will have very little to no vibration, which is where a handle or a central will be located. And then you pluck the tuning fork at the top with these specific strings that are even shown in some of the hieroglyphs. And the fork would vibrate for minutes on end at the same frequency.
Are you there?
I'm still here. Did I cut out?
It sounded like you cut off for a second, but you're there.
Sorry. But I thought, yeah, there you go, Doctor Who. It was actually called a sonic bore. This is what it's referred to as if you go look at it. I think it was called a sonic bore or a sonic drill. And it just vibration.
They talk about levitation through sonics too.
I don't know if I have much believed that, as I believe.
Well, they do levitate in science. They have experiments where they do levitate using sound, but that's using our electronic means. And we're not talking about 20-ton rocks. We're talking about like a ping pong ball. But the theory's there.
Okay, so yet again, Sonics. Thanks, Saki. So to look at this, the farther you look into history, it comes down to what do we believe of what has been found? What do we think hasn't been found? And what might we be overlooking? And the tools that we found are a rudimentary, large, heavy hammer, which would be somewhat equal to a sledgehammer to us, I suppose. And we found a couple of carving tools that were made of copper or low-grade iron.
Or
wood,
bronze.
Bronze, soft metals, easy to work with. There's the way they measured being different, used by rope. I forget what it was called, but it was 1 point something or 2 point something meters long. I'm sorry about all my facts, guys. I'm not eidetic.
Is it the Galapagos Island that has the elongated heads?
Yeah, Easter Island.
Easter Island, right. Did you know that up until recently, we didn't realize, but those elongated heads have full bodies underneath them?
Yeah, it's also proposed that those might be a poured structure, a poured formed structure.
I'm just saying, we never knew they had full bodies beneath them until one guy dug one out. And it literally has shoulders and a torso and legs. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we still don't know. We're still learning.
And here's the curiosity that before the show, open up my mind. How do you want to discuss this? Just got all the information, a whole bunch of new ideas and theories out, but to discuss how did they go about this. So this goes back to my idea. If you want something, you're going to have the smartest people look at doing it for you, and they're going to tell you what the best current ways of doing it are, and then you're going to have a bunch of people do it. Now, it was a different time than today. today people have their jobs. You have mandatory breaks, lunches, all of this and that. But back then, how much of it was around? People would work sun up to sundown as long as they were fed and they were taken care of or whipped, depending on what the situation. No, the Easter Island heads were full bodies, but over time.
Or maybe they were working for what they thought was a god.
That's also true. Whatever techniques they had, you have to almost remove the time it takes to finish the project, because the project was set out to be done, period. Regardless of what it took to do it or how many times or what you had to fix. So the goal was to get it done efficiently and quickly and right. So whatever method they had to do this, they had all the time and no distractions other than weather.
The real problem is with mainstream archaeology. They have a paradigm that they believe in, and they are unwilling to alter that paradigm whatsoever. They and when they run into these things, like that place that was buried in Turkey that the goat farmer found, and when they uncovered it, they found that there was a whole complex of carved towers and columns and arches, all hand carved with animals. Even some dinosaurs were carved into the sides of these things. Animals that were not around in this area were carved into these things, and the whole complex was hand buried. They didn't find any tools. They didn't find anything else. And they dated this complex to 10,000 years.
Are you speaking of the one in Turkey on top of the hill that got that was built and buried in what is estimated to be a roughly 1,000 to 1,500 year time period?
10,000 years, around the time of the ice.
Not ago, but they're saying from the time that it was built to the time that it was buried left, that it was used for around 1,000 to 1,500 years.
But this was also around the time that we were supposed to be cavemen.
No, again, you have to wonder, if you look at human existence on the planet, we've been around longer than 10,000 years, and we can identify bipedular species farther than 10,000 years back.
But imagine also these guys carved a stegosaurus in the stone. How the hell did they know what a stegosaurus looked like? Unless there were stegosauruses when they were carving it.
That's a weird one. I'll have to look into that carving. That one didn't come up. I was looking at, honestly, construction methods and technologies and trying to determine would be better. Trying to determine what could they have used. Now my mind instantly went to, well, maybe they took harder stones and put them in something and rubbed that to cause the cutting and the smoothness.
Yeah, listen, all those techniques, those are all well and good, and those are the most obvious things. But when you have stuff like those damn Lego blocks in the what is it, Machu Picchu? The one that's right by the lines of the gods. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think I crossed over that one.
They have these H stones where they have intricate carving where it is inside. It's an H, and then they've got it stepped and a stepped again and stepped again. So it's like triply stepped into the rock. And all the corners are still perfect, 45 degrees, and the rock is almost polished.
All right. And there's weirder ones. And since Dada's going to bring them up, let's bring up some weird ones. They're in a hillside somewhere. I forget what country in the Middle East, out there where all the dry desert is, obviously. There is a pair of staircase, like 4 stairs carved into the top of a hill, up the side of a rock. So you look up and you see stairs that are upside down. They should be below you. They're carved into the rock upside down. There's areas.
So it makes me wonder if that rock didn't move through geological terms. How old is that rock? Could it have moved and flipped in the time?
Or could they have cut it and screwed up and left it? Which would be some people's thought process, is that some of these stones were cut and then moved. But what if some of them were cut, moved, and then precision cut?
Could you imagine precision cutting something like that and it being a mistake? I mean...
Well, when you have a construction crew working on things, do you have your best guys or your worst guys doing the fine cutting and the electrical?
I understand, but at some point, you know, it takes so long to do. At some point, somebody's got to say, hey, wait a second, you're building those stairs upside down off a cliff.
There's other areas, and again, these aren't in the same places. These are, for most of these large buildings, like you'll hear a lot of people say, archaeologists, me and Dada will mention, the stone quarries are in some cases 20, 30, 50, 80 miles away from the site. And to move the stone from there to the site alone, 80 miles.
That's crazy too.
You have no horses. You have maybe some camels.
And even if you had people, even if you had 20, 50,000 people, then you have to support the 50,000 people. So you need people, you know, growing food, cooking food, I mean, making rope. I mean, and even then, how much rope can you have to put 50,000 people on it? And could you even...
Again, if you did it right...
Yeah, but could that rope be strong enough to actually pull with the weight of 50,000 people?
It wouldn't have to be.
What do you mean?
In one of those videos, if you saw the one where the guy moved the pole barn, earlier in one of his videos, he has a design that looks like a set of rounded steps. It's a really simple design. You'd see it on a motocross track. It's like little runs that go across. And you can take a block and push it over the rungs, and the momentum of the block alone will keep moving it along these for a few at a time. If you use that concept in old age, we wouldn't see the grooves that would have been cut in the ground to move, to rotate these boulders through these grooves up into, and it wouldn't matter at an inclination if it was done right. There are methods, if you're willing to put the time and the work and the manpower in, there are methods that they could have, from what I've seen today.
They were talking about walking those I forget the name of them. Are they Malloy? I want to say Malloy, but anyways, those elongated heads and the bodies.
Yeah.
If you wobble it a certain way, you can actually get it to walk.
The guy said if you tip it off of the back, it takes almost no effort to get it to walk.
Well, yeah, I mean, God forbid you lose control of it, but yeah.
Well,
I mean, all this stuff, it's not no effort, but yeah, it's a lot less effort than dragging it.
If you think about it, wouldn't anybody who does these, if you had the ability to build these, wouldn't you be using the easiest, most repeatable methods?
It's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, there are pictures. I wish I could... Let me see. I'm gonna see if I can Google a picture. 1 second.
I can't bring it up with the settings I have on today.
Yeah, no problem. The largest...
There is a rock that is estimated to weigh about 165 tons. It sits at the bottom of a quarry. It looks like it was cut,
right, it's halfway
and
in and halfway out.
Right. And they think it was one that was supposed to be used that... I'm not sure what they think it was left behind for, or that it was made and not needed, which I don't know. If you've got a crew 30 miles away at a quarry and they're cutting stones, they might still be cutting and readying stones when the job is finished.
It's in Baalbek in Lebanon, the largest known megalith. And if you look at this thing, there are 5 guys standing next to it. The stone is laying on its side. It's 2 stories high. I mean, wide. It is 10 stories at least long, and it's 1 story thick. So we're looking at a 10 by 30 by 100 stone.
Now, here's another weird thing. That because I like throwing weird things out there, let's talk about this. We today, as a species, are either overly fat in most cases or overly thin. But overall, we as a species are weak. What a man or a human or a bipedal being could have done to fight or work 10,000 years ago might have been 5 times, 10 times the capability of what a strong man now would be.
Yes. But then again, if you want to bring up the weirder side of what about the giants?
There is a possibility that there were people that lived that were around 9 to 11 feet tall. There was a species of humanoids that lived out in the Middle East, I want to say. That was between 8 to 11 feet or something like that.
Yeah, they had like 4 rows of teeth. They had 6 fingers on their hands.
I don't know
6
about 4 rows of teeth.
Well, that's what I heard.
From the research I've done on humans, there was up to 10 different humanoid populations living on the planet. 3 of them were able to have sex and create offspring properly that were able to survive. And it's entirely feasible to believe that before the evolution of the hominids into what we now refer to as human, there were larger beings. There have been some found to be 9, 10, 11 feet tall almost in stature. And you have to think at that size, you're going to have more strength. In that time, having to rely more on meat and less on vegetables and grains, though they were becoming a thing in that time, you were going to be stronger, have more protein, and work longer. So you would have been bigger, better built, more toned.
Stronger, faster.
We'll make him stronger. We'll make him faster. It just comes down to there's a little we know, there's a lot we can presume, and there's the extraordinary things that we see.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yes.
And I just like throwing sound clips in there. Why not?
Don't worry.
Be happy.
Be happy.
I know, I do that every time. What the fuck was that? So what does the chat have to throw in here? I know you guys have been piping in. I know it looks like we have a few people in here who like archaeology and understand this. So we have the theories. We will leave them as theories because we can't say they're true. There's a theory of rope cutting, using sand, water, and what they would have used as ropes to fine grade the stones together to be able to fit more precisely. There is sonic cutting, which is believed that they had.
I put a link in the chat. If they click on that, you can see the stone, and you can see a whole group of people standing on top of the stone. Now that's one big mother stone.
Yeah. We have sonic cutting, which is done with a tuning fork and a long rod that could be made of bronze or copper. And we have what my thought process was, and I've never really put a lot of thought into this, so I threw it together in my head trying to figure it out. I was thinking maybe logs or rope with hardened stones or something in there to make some sort of sanding paper type device to be able to smooth down or cut down these stones. And if you think about it, you could have made a saw blade out of the right stones. It would take you a long time to cut, but
we're talking about all these big stones. Have you seen anything about those small carved stones in South America?
no. I was more looking at like structural stones and the buildings and the architecture. I started to get into the roads. But roads, for the most part, are just dropped, laid, precise stone, whereas buildings took a bit more.
These small stones are carved, and they have, like, to give you an example, they have, like, biology. They have, like, internal medicine. They have, like, a map of the world, globe. They have, like the baby inside the womb. Amazing stuff, and stuff way beyond what they should have for their science.
Yeah.
And even the stones themselves are like these amazingly polished and detailed carving that we would have trouble duplicating also.
Yeah. And if you look at our technology today, look at how far we've quote-unquote advanced from where we were. Yeah, we have technology, but our construction abilities and resources have changed to make it easier on us in the short term and not necessarily last longer.
There was a long time in our history where we went backwards. I mean, if you think about it,
oh yeah,
you've heard of the Antitherica computer, the one that they found in the Mediterranean. It was all these gears and whatnot. It was at a sunken ship, and they've since X-rayed it and figured out how to make it, and they've replicated it, and it ended up being a analog computer that would not only tell you like the moons, but where the suns and certain stars and whatnot were, and would predict these things. Now, I mean, we as a people today couldn't even come up with a concept that people in Greece, in ancient Greece, were coming up with computers. And I mean, this is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before the clock.
Well, what would have been a computer in that era?
Well, an analog computer, because let's face it, even when we started with computers, we started with analog computers in World War II. Yep. The what do you call it? The code breaking machines. But what I'm trying to say is, we were fairly advanced back then, and then we had the Middle Ages, and we had the Black Death, and we had a mini Ice Age, and we sort of like went backwards. We've
been through a couple small ice ages in the last few thousand years. We just came out of one in the late 1600s or mid 1600s.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, Europe in the 12th and 13th and 14th century was really just a treading water. Yeah. It wasn't really coming up with anything new.
And that goes back to the point of, like, the one theory believes that the tuning fork was believed to be a rod of power because it had the power to cut through rock if used properly, or the power to bore a hole if done properly, and therefore became a sacred momentum of power. But when you stop using it and don't know what it's for anymore, it became a resemblance of the stature of power, not at the ability of what it could do.
I mean, you think about it. It wasn't until after the Black Death, and you had Da Vinci, basically taking apart dead people in the basement of the Vatican in secret, because if he was found out, he would be killed. And the designs and the pictures he's made are still used today in medicine.
We became, what is the word for it when you don't throw salt over your shoulder? Superstitious. There's another word for it.
Well,
we became
religious, superstitious,
wrapped up in the this or that will go wrong when you do things, to the point where, wasn't it mid to late 1800s where people finally realized it wasn't going to hurt or kill you to come outside of a woman?
Well, remember, it was, people, first of all, back then, people didn't read or write. The only people that read or write were monks, and they were the ones that basically handled libraries and books and rewriting books. So the holder of all knowledge was the Vatican.
Yeah.
They were the ones to say what was what.
Or
when
again,
if you went against what they were saying, you went to jail.
It probably held the same stature. I know we see it in movies and things like that on the times that we're discussing, ancient times, where you'd have your leader, your hierarch, that would be in charge, and their wife or whatever they would be. And then they'd have the concubines and the people that would do the work and their officials. So if you no longer have somebody to pass the job on to that can learn the trade, that trade would then have died.
Right. But if it was a popular trade, it would
aspects of it or part of it would have carried on for years, and ways of things were done. But certain things would have died off with the people who knew what they were doing, knew how to.
Even I'll tell you, even today, when it comes to NASA and rockets, do you know that we are using rockets from Russia that were done during the Cold War, during the space race?
Really?
Yeah.
There's some amazing things about the Cold War. We should go into that on one of these shows.
I'm just saying, we're using technology 50 years old today.
Yeah, 60, 70.
We bought surplus Russian rocket engines, okay, to use in today's NASA.
Yep. Isn't, what's his name with Tesla and SpaceX? Isn't he using old something Avenger 9 rockets or something from 80s, 70s and 80s?
Very, very, very possible.
Wasn't he redesigning and refitting them?
It's still amazing that he's come up with a rocket that lands itself and then takes off. That's pretty damn cool.
Right, but we haven't. The point in that you brought up is, and again, Saki says it here, we've not come up with anything new for decades. We really haven't advanced from where we are. Right. We're doing all the same stuff. We're just doing it in a more modern way. We
not
need
even.
to...
and that's kind of like. That kind of is like the argument for something that is happening behind the scenes that's secret. Because if we've mothballed like the SR-71 and all these advanced planes, we must have something to replace them.
Is it that technology exists? Okay, so let's use this, Saki. We haven't made anything new for decades.
At least
now we construct buildings by molding them, by prefabricating them and standing them together and bolting them. In millennia ago, when they did this, they either made the rocks fit on top of each other. There's a belief that some rocks may have a groove and or channel in them. There's also a belief from evidence that metal anchors were melted and poured to hold rocks together. Yeah. Now, that's somewhat what we do today, but we don't pour the same. We don't set up the same. We don't fabricate and cast the same. We use faster methods because we worry about how quickly the concrete's going to dry, not how thoroughly and how thick and how long it's going to last. We've changed things to adapt to us needing it more readily now, as opposed to it making sure we don't have to do it again.
I mean, back in the day, back in the ancient times, when they didn't have the math and they didn't have the engineering, they relied on making things as durable as they possibly could by basically overusing the material or using the material in a way where it could never break, it could never wear out. And then as we have become more advanced, I mean, look at it even today. If you look at a building that was made in the 1950s, they used a hell of a lot more concrete. They used a hell of a lot thicker drywall.
They used
since stuff was so cheap. Huh?
They put fewer additives in it at the time to
Right.
make it dry faster.
Right. And like the apartment building I'm in is 53. The walls, it's a half-inch sheetrock, and over the half-inch sheetrock there's a quarter-inch of cement, and over the quarter-inch of cement there's a quarter-inch of plaster. I mean, these walls, you can nail hammer a nail in it and hang almost anything. You go to an apartment that was made within the last 5 years, it's got thin-ass radioactive Chinese drywall that'll probably poison you before it'll fall off the wall.
No. You'll turn the corner, go to turn the light switch on, put your hand through the wall, and all this powder goes poofing out of the wall as it falls apart around you. That's how drywall works these days.
It's really cheaply done.
Yeah, they've gone from making, it used to be 3/4 and 5/8 to 3/16 and 5/8 to 1/4 and 5/16, and it just keeps getting thinner. I won't use it.
Thinner and thinner and thinner, and the same with cars, and the same with electronics. Everything is made to just throw away.
We're trying to make things better, but in a way we're making things worse.
No, we're not trying to make things better. We're trying to make things. We're trying
more
to make
quickly available, lighter, quicker, more reliable, better fuel intake, more consumer friendly.
Maybe you can say efficient, but I don't know about better.
I don't know how efficient a car is when you could buy a 1980s pickup truck and drive it for 400,000 miles, replacing the tires and brakes a few times, versus a 2010 pickup truck, drive it 100,000 miles, replace everything at least once, and still have it die at 150,000. And it costs you more.
I mean, my ex had a Subaru. The damn wheel bearings kept on having to be replaced. I mean, wheel bearings are like a foundation for the car.
It's a suspension design flaw. I'm noticing it a lot in the newer cars. There's a suspension design flaw that causes the wheel bearings and the front suspension to go even
The wheel
faster.
bearings are just cheaply fucking made. I mean, wheel bearings on a 67 Cadillac probably would last 4 cars. In other words, you could probably take the used bearings out, put them in another car, and run that car to death, and then take them out and put them in another car. Where now, the wheel bearings, wear out, fall out, break up.
That one's almost a reverse of technology, too, because if you look at some of the older style wheel bearings, and now we're way off topic, guys. Sorry, but follow me here. If you look at the older style wheel bearings in a lot of the old heavy cars, you get these 1 or 2 little pieces that were about 2 inches across. They were round. They had a 1.5-inch hole in the middle. The axle went through. You took off your brake and the front and the back, and you slid this thing in after you popped the other one out with a little bit of grease, and it had a bunch of rollers. The new ones are the size of your whole brake shaft and CV joint connection. It's huge. It's heavy. It's ridiculous. And now you have to have them pressed into 10,000 pounds and pressed out at 5,000 pounds, and you can't do it yourself because of how much work it takes to do it.
Right.
So we've gone backwards there.
You have engineers that have never turned a wrench designing cars for mechanics to repair.
I don't know. At the same time, let's take this back to medieval times. You have people running a job site that have never lifted that 160,000 pound rock, telling people to lift 160,000 pound rocks.
Yeah, but if they managed it, if they're managers there, I'm sure they've done it once before or twice before.
Mm-hmm. Or were taught how to do it by the people that did it before. And you got to think
Right.
trade was different, especially longer ago. You'd look for the people that you could train to do that job, and they would be trained to do that job and not work their way through. Thin about candy bars, twice as expensive for half the size. Yeah. Smoke 150,000 pound rocks. That's a lot of rock. I'll get back to you on that one. Harley Davidson made a bulletproof bikes back in the day. They realized this and decided to change so they could get more money.
All right. The built-in obsolescence.
I remember driving, this is funny, I drove an 83 Regal limited edition coupe. The entire car was made of steel. I slid on a patch of ice, took out a road sign, slid into a ditch, and just had to get towed out, and it drove away.
Yeah.
This less effort in a different car, slid on a patch of ice, hit a rock, blew a tire, broke a headlight, and dented the whole front fender.
Well, I mean, again, the headlight, it was glass, right?
Plastic.
Oh, it was
The old
plastic.
ones were glass. Remember the
Yeah,
old,
the old ones were glass.
half-inch thick
They
glass
stayed clear.
headlights?
Glass,
Yeah, they
stayed
did.
clear. Now all the headlights turn yellow.
That's because the old glass headlights were vacuum-sealed bulbs. They weighed like 2 pounds each. The new ones weigh like an ounce and then go into a plastic housing and fill with water. Well, here we are, guys. We are coming to the end of this hour. I have to say, I've spent 9 hours crunching videos and reading about tools. I've come up with stuff that absolutely blew my mind on this topic. What do you think, Dada?
I think there's plenty to do and plenty to see and plenty to take in, change our history. The mainstream has to basically shake off their dogmas and literally we need to rewrite our history because it isn't what we're told.
We have to think about this practically, too. We didn't have TVs and technology that we have today to distract from the time it would have taken to do these jobs. We would have had sun up till sundown. And there's also another plausible theory that I'm going to enter in here at the end of the conversation because it kind of has nothing to do with the initial conversation. Looking at other things I've been researching lately, the area around some of these that are in the Middle East and these non-fertile lands, these large structures in these large desert areas, you have to wonder if, because the larger structures are usually in these desert, again, usually in around the parallels, why can't I, the equator, if they had farmed the living hell out of that area to feed the people working, they would have ruined the soil.
Into a desert.
It would have turned it into a desert.
Yeah.
Think
Interesting
about that.
point. Yeah, interesting point. Because 10,000 years ago, that was all full of water. It had plants. It had. we know that earlier in history, there was much more of a jungle, tropical. The tropical was much higher and lower.
Also, if they'd have found something in that time that they could have grown, it would have been wheat or grain. And if you grow wheat or grain consecutively for a dozen or 2 dozen years, you burn out the nutrients in the soil and make it, I forget what the word is, you make it unable to grow crops for several years.
Oh yeah, it's like the Dust Bowl.
That's what happens. So you have to wonder if maybe some of these areas that aren't in fertile land anymore, if they might not be in fertile land, partly because there were such large crews working on these buildings that they would have depleted the entire land around them trying to
There are people that say that there are water lines, water marks on the pyramids and on the that line in the front. What the hell is it called? The the resting lion.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know the one you're talking about. I don't know the name of it.
Yeah. They think that the weather marks isn't just from sand, but previous floods.
Yeah. we'll get into that a whole nother night, because that's a fun one I started to get into, like how there's a country I was watching a video
Welcome,
on the other day, and it was to stay away.
NSFMJC TV.
Just Jason, I think. I think it's Jason. Pretty sure it's Jason.
Oh, okay. Hi, Jason.
But yeah. Guys, it has been an awesome show. My mind is blown. Techniques of drilling with sound. He's been in here on and off. Techniques of drilling with sound. Cutting with rope and sand. And even moving boulders that weigh tons by rolling them or lifting them.
Yeah, but you're not going to roll the boulder that I pasted into chat. I'm sorry.
I'll keep looking. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but I see feasible technologies that would have made large structures happen over long periods of time with decent-sized workforces.
Yeah, maybe.
So, with that, guys, I'm going to try this outro again and see if it works today. I thank you all for showing up. Showing up. I can't talk.
Joining. Yeah. Thank you for
joining. Thank you for joining up. I'm making a new language today. I don't know what it's going to be called. It's the NumbedSkull language. It's words that don't sound right. But here we go on the way outro.
Joining up.
Well, yes, we made it to the end. What do you know? I guess there's only really one thing to do, and that's to the buttons. Oh yes, there's buttons. Please